Hi, good afternoon. This is Liz McGee, Prophecy for the Last Hour, and I am going to do a teaching today. I have a lot of titles, but again, I'm going to try to unpack a little bit more Paul. I have been going way deeper into the historical Paul. Okay, we're talking about finding the historical Jesus. I believe it's very Yeshua. It's very important we find the historical Paul also. I'm not going to do it in this teaching, but I have very quickly I've done a lot of research on proving that Paul was, there's a lot of charges against him today. I mean, it's not like a bad thing per se. We're in a time where we're kind of like deconstructing everything, getting everything right back to its root and trying to then build again, hopefully on the solid foundation. So today I want to build again on what I believe is the foundation that Paul spoke a lot of, and that has been so misinterpreted and misunderstood. Just like he said, some of the things he says are very hard to understand, because Paul, being a person who I have devoted years to understanding the esoteric, and people who listen to my YouTube, you know this, language. So I'm very sensitive to it. I'm very keyed into it. And when I see it, I go, oh yes, okay, I know what they're talking about. And that's what happens a lot with Paul. He is a very esoteric writer. That's why Peter said, Kepha said, a lot of the things that Paul says are hard to understand. Now, people can, it's all, in my opinion, how we look at the data. I don't have a problem with that statement because I see it confirmed by others and by Paul's own words, because he is hard to understand. We've had almost 2,000 years, 1,800 years of misconstruing what he was saying to a very specific demographic on the planet called the Gentiles. And in the Gentiles were the lost sheep, that he had received a commission from Yahweh, from Yeshua, to go and to reach deep into these Gentile, heathen, pagan nations. Okay? Now, this is the thing. I'm going to start out, that Paul really did have a Jewish mother. If Paul can prove genealogically that even though he was a Herodian, his father, according to the halakha of Jewish law, if the mother is Jewish, the child is Jewish. That has been around since the time of Ezra. That's how they've always determined it. It's absolutely halakha, and it is an uncontested halakha. And when I say halakha, that means a legal ruling. This is how they interpret the law, and this one there's no discussion about it. Today, like anything amongst the more liberal, those who want to just really don't like the boundaries of Torah anymore, we always want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you'll get a lot of liberal groups that will say, oh no, it doesn't matter, well, there are always good reasons. There is Jewish halakha, and many of the Orthodox are trying to hold on to this. But Paul had a Jewish mother. He was a Herodian. The Herods came in as Idumeans, and they married deeply into the Hasmonean dynasty and to the high priest, even though it's a usurped high priestly line of the time in which we find Paul. So that's a huge component that I'm going to unpack. But tonight I got something different, because the accusation that Paul is always saying, oh, we don't have to keep the law. That's the big rub today. That's like, okay, that is like such a misunderstanding of what he's talking about. People who study deeply in this know that there are about 10 words, or the way law is used. Like it's not a one-stop shop word. You can't use the word law for everything. It's a very specific and nuanced law. So when Paul says that we are no longer under the law, you can't assume he's talking about Torah law, because this is not the foundation of his argument. His argument starts way before even Moses, okay? So, and I'm going to build this case. Because, see, our biggest problem today, and I'm convinced of this, are these translations. Oh my gosh, these translations. This is the point. If you start to build on on a faulty structure. Oh, and that's what we have. We have a very faulty structure. Let me, right, where do I want to start? I want to start in the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch, it's a great work. Now, people who have read Enoch, it's a extra biblical book. It's found tons. It's one of the most found fragments and whole books in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it tells you that this is a very highly prized, highly read book at the time of Yeshua. Now, in chapter 89 of Enoch, I'm going to start there. There is some very interesting words, and we're going to unpack that. But this is in a section that people call the animal apocalypse, okay? Enoch is an apocalypse. It's written parabolically, allegorically. It's written very fantastically. And I've been through a lot of this. This is done deliberately. This is a style of writing in which deep realities, truths, are couched in a parabolic way. Yeshua kept this tradition, you know, when he kept talking in parables. It's a very established way to disseminate esoteric information. Now, it says in Enoch 89, now I want to give a little background, because I've done actually a teaching on this. I've done it on Enoch. If you want to search my YouTubes, I went great length with this. It's called The Animal Apocalypses in Enoch, and I flesh this out a little more. But in this, you got to understand the keys. So I'll give you some of the big keys, where he is always talking about animals. See, because when you read these things, all of a sudden it's tigers and panthers and wild beasts and foxes and dogs and wild boar, and you're like, what is he talking about? What happens in Enoch in these animal apocalypses, he's painting it from this point of view where, and it says, like white men. Oh, we distort these scriptures, okay? Not talking about white, like I'm a white person. That's not what we're talking about, okay? It's talking about a pure spirit, okay? A white is symbolizes spiritual purity. So a white men, and men are the angels. It's all flip-flop. So I'm giving you the key. So when you read this, men are the angels. So white men are spiritually pure angels, okay? The humans are depicted as animals. So you have all kinds. You have dogs and foxes and sheep and bullocks and, you know, the wild beasts, okay? The earth is sort of depicted as a barnyard. So all these animals are in this, it's like a yard, a huge, 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 I really kind of think of Orwellian kind of animal farm, okay? And the heavens is referred to as like the high roof. So they're in a barnyard and there's a roof over them, which is the heavens. So this is important. You got to have that whole construct in your mind, because that's the premise. So there's a place in, like I said, we're going to chapter 89. And this is in a time of, right at time of the Tower of Babel had just happened. The nations are starting to totally go south again, rebel against Yahweh. Abraham is coming on the scene. He's calling out a new leader, so to speak. Abraham, we know we get Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes, we get a nation. He's starting a brand new work, again, on the face of the earth. And he says here in verse 59, and it says, well, let me just read it, and then I'll go back and sort of put it in more context. So, but the time is right around Nimrod and Babel and all the rebellion again, and the Gentile nations are beginning to hibernize themselves again. It's a very, and this is within 300 to 500 years again after the flood. At the time, it's also referred to as a time Peleg, who's one of the descendants of Shem, a descendant of Eber, or brother of you, where the nations and the earth gets divided. Okay, so verse 59, it picks up, and he says, and he called 70 shepherds, he being Yahweh. Okay, this is sort of how God is working through this thing, and put away those sheep. Or in other words, he called 70 shepherds and he gave them to those sheep. Now the sheep is always, in Enoch, is always referred to the righteous remnant. Okay, that's what we're, lost sheep. We're the sheep of his pasture. I mean, that's a pretty easy biblical key to figure out. Okay, so he gives the sheep to the 70 shepherds. This is at a time, okay, Let me just stay linear. In order that they should pasture them. And he spoke to the shepherds and to their companions. And he said, each single one of you shall now pasture the sheep, and everything I command you do. Verse 60, he says, and I deliver them over to you according to number, and will tell you which of them shall be destroyed, those killed. And he gave those sheep over to them, and to another he called and said, watch. Now, to another set of shepherds, so he gave these sheep, this specific demographic, over to these 70 shepherds, and he told them to watch over them and do what he says with them. Then he called another group of shepherds, and he said, watch and see that everything that those shepherds do concerning those sheep, watch everything they do, and for they will destroy more than I have commanded. And each superabundance of destruction which these shepherds do, write down how many they destroy by my command and how many destroy them by their own will. And write down separately each destruction by each shepherd. And according to the number, recite before me how many they have destroyed of their own account and how many they were given them for destruction, that this may be a testimony for me against them. So in other words, he's keeping a record. He's got double books. This is the book of life and the book of the dead, so to speak. He is recording. Oh my gosh. And I think he's got a lot of backup recordings, but that's a whole different issue. Okay. That I may know every deed of the shepherds, to give them over, and may see that they do, whether they do what I have commanded them or not. Now, what is the big issue here is who and what are these 70 shepherds, okay? And this is what we're really going to start to unpack here, because my opinion, and I believe this is the biblically accurate one, and this is what's coming out today, is we're beginning to understand, kind of lift the veil back, take the blinders off, come awake, look around, understand we are in a highly populated cosmos with many dimensions. There are a lot of living beings, and yes, there are many angelic, or we'll call them living beings among us, okay? Fallen angels. Then these fallen, there's a lot of history of this. We have the fall in the garden. We have Genesis 6. These fallen angels come down. Now we have a new group, these 70 shepherds. These are watcher angels. Okay? Now, well, let me just start with unpack this. I want to say it one more thing. I've said this before. There's a great translation that I use for the book of Enoch. It's by a gentleman from like the 1800s. His name is Shode, S-C-H-O-D-D-E. Remember the first name off the top of my head. Just Google Book of Enoch Shode, S-H-O-D-D-E. I would recommend, because his footnotes are phenomenal. This guy was a Bible scholar par excellence. I don't know why why it hasn't been discovered greater, because, well, I know there's reasons for all these things, but it's a great, and read the notes, because it'll help you unpack the keys and the understanding of Enoch by 100%. So anyways, he goes on to say, highly footnoted, and in one of his footnotes, he says, throughout all this symbolism, men are always represented animals. So human beings, I said this in the beginning, are always represented as animals, and the heathen nations as wild beasts or as birds of prey. Okay, so now let me go down to this. So you have to keep that in mind. So we are talking now about these 70 shepherds were put over the nations. This is all part of the story. Like I said, this is what is in our Bible, but we don't really understand what they're talking about. So to backdrop this again, when after the flood, and Noah was the king of the earth, and he was trying to lead the 3 boys back into repopulating, and he was trying to keep the laws of God. The Noahide laws is the ruling standard. Again, Yahweh always has laws. He always gives them very clearly. So no man is without excuse. But there was rebellion in the camp. We know this. We know that Ham with Mitzrayim, with Cush, with Nimrod, we're knowing this whole story. He totally took huge pockets of the tribe, or the people groups again, south into great disobedience. Almost even worse than the flood. In other words, they picked up all the behavior of the pre-flood, and I think they added a whole mess to it, okay? So we're beginning to have a whole mess again. So what is happening is that Yahweh is saying basically, all right, this is my plan. you nations, now these are Gentile nations, he's saying you do not want to obey me. It's obvious. You're going to do your own thing. Look at my classes. I'm trying to keep them straight. You're going to do your own thing. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put you under the tutelar. This is a word we're going to, a tutelar. This is sort of when Paul become under a tutor, under a guardian, under watcher angels that are going to watch over you. That's what he's talking in 70s angels. They're going to be your gods. This is the beginning of the pagan gods. Was a plan of Yahweh. And they're going to lead you because you don't want to be led by me, but I'm going to pull out my people through Abraham, and I'm going to be their God, and they're going to follow me. And this is where you get the juxtaposition of the 70 watcher angels over the 70 nations. These are now the 70 Gentile nations and the nation of Israel and his people that is coming forth now through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, through the 12 tribes into the nation. And he said their God is going to be Yahweh, which is actually the angel of the Lord. He gives them over to his angel, okay? Which I won't get into the deeper esoteric, but that's biblical. I mean, you should know that, right? The angel of the Lord who watches over Israel. And we get a lot of information, especially as they come out of Egypt and all that kind of stuff. So that's the backdrop. Now, these, let me read this again from his footnotes. He says the shepherds are appointed according to protect the sheep from the wild animals. Now, remember I said the Gentiles had become hybridized again. They were bringing in Nephilim genetics in. They were, again, every evil work, the inclination of their hearts were getting towards every evil work. They were not living together, in unity and setting up courts of justice. Like, how was there was war, there was violence, there was, domination. That's what Nimrod did. He became the first, world ruler again, dominating all his brothers or all the other peoples. Okay, so we're having this situation. The shepherds are appointed according to Yahweh to protect the sheep, his people, those in those groups, that still love Yahweh. So not everybody, and this is where a lot of the writings, so like this book, the writings of Abraham that have come out, because it really kind of does tell you there's a lot of people, even in Nimrod's courts. It tells how Abraham, there were believers. And he sent Abraham into their different, and these people were able to come and still here. And this time, actually, Shem and Noah were still alive. Abraham was on the scene for quite a little bit of time. They were all together. And they were known as, Noah was known as I think was his name, known as a wise man, one of, the kings of the earth that was put in place by Yahweh Elohim. Okay, not a usurped king like Nimrod coming from, chthonic. My last teaching, you should listen, an under the earth deity. Okay, so these shepherds are appointed according to protect the sheep from these wild animals, from the heathen nations, interpreting the shepherds as heathen rulers. See, so what has happened is the church, a lot of the Jews, this started to happen a couple hundred years after this. The translations started to get watered down, and these just became, these 70 shepherds were no longer understood to be tutelar angelic hosts, and they had sort of denigrated down to becoming, well, just the rulers, the physical. Okay, see, remember there's always the visible in the invisible. Yes, this is the whole point of the Caesars and the gods, and they would always make images. They would do these things, but behind these are the principalities, the powers, the spiritual wickedness that is in the high places, these angelic orders. Okay, so during the time that Israel, by the will of God, was to be oppressed and overcome by the nations around her, he had placed them in the hands of 70 shepherds as guardians who would watch that Israel should not suffer and endure more than was God's will. So when it says in the New Testament, we will judge angels, this is who it's talking about. We are going to be able to judge how well they took care of us. Especially, Ephraimite has lost sheep, for the last, I think 3,500 years. All right, we're going to judge angels. You better believe it. And we're going to have an impeccable, immaculate record book in which to say, yeah, he said to take out the really wicked. Well, you just did, genocide on that whole group then. Okay, it's going to come out. Every hidden thing is going to come into the light and into the judgment. Okay, these shepherds neglect to do and deliver to the wild more. They always it gave to, wait a minute, I should just slow down. These shepherds neglected to do what they were told and delivered to the wild beasts and birds of prey, angelic, and remember, angels, birds represent angels that are in the heavenly, that's an order of angels. Kind of my videos unpack a lot of these things, and the wild beasts of the field refers to the chthonic, to the under the earth deities. You have earth deities and you have astral deities. These are things we're beginning to understand, and that these shepherds did more than they should have done, and hence these shepherds will be punished and will be cast with the other fallen angels, because already before this we had Azazel and that whole band that came down on Mount Hermon. They have already been, gathered up, captured, and put into a dungeon, a prison, which is under the earth, which is really probably an after, but we won't go there. That's all getting unpacked and stuff. Who has also proved faithless into the fiery abyss, into one of the very lower levels of the Tartarus, okay, the underworlds, okay? So now, this is something we have to see, because I want to go and screen share something that I have, because it's important to understand how this understanding that this, in translation, we lost these sons of God, 70 shepherds, the translation today we have our Bible will say sons of Israel, which makes no sense, but people it's just a complete, it's a sorcery. It's there and you never question it. You never go deep, and it's like, whatever. But let's unpack this just a little bit. I have something I want to share. Okay, I don't know. Hold on a second. Let me go back to this. Let me do this correctly. I think I need to screen share this so you can see it. Okay. All right. This is just some cut and paste from here, but I want to show you here some definitions. A tutelary or a tutelar, okay, which is really what the word they've given for these 70 shepherds, for this class of angelic, these watcher angels here, is a deity or spirit who is a guardian, patron, or protector of a part of a particular place, geographic feature, person, lineage, nation, culture, or occupation. See, and this will explain so much of the ancient culture and all their paganism and their worshiping of quote-unquote other gods. So what happened is these 70 shepherds got corrupted immediately. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is the whole story of the ancient world. And much of what they had, so many gods, so to speak, that down to an occupation had, a god over it, a city, a nation, and these things would war with each other. So this is again to Paul's admonition in Ephesians 6:12, that he says, where we war against principalities, powers, and spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, we went through them. Now, this I want to show you. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Dr. Michael Heiser, who's done a lot of research in the original languages and writes a lot on this kind of stuff. But he has figured it out that now in the Masoretic text, in our text today, 90% of our Bibles will say, well, here, I want to give you some translations of this verse, okay? Let's start in Deuteronomy 32:7. It says, remember the days of old. This is Moses saying, remember the days of old. Consider the years of all generations. Ask your father and he will inform you, your elders, and they will tell you. This is part of the oral Torah. This is information that they were supposed to always be passing down, okay? So that you didn't lose this understanding. And it's very important. But it did get lost. So by time of our Bibles today, and here, this is what we have. I have 3 different translations to show you. Deuteronomy 32:8. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, meaning their tutelary angel, okay, he placed them under, remember, his inheritance was Israel. They got an inheritance, quote unquote, supposedly, pockets or sections or tribes of these Gentile nations. When he separated the children of men, he set the bounds of peoples according to the numbers of the sons of God. Now that's a translation, I forgot to put like a New World Bible or something like that, a modern translation. Okay, so there says the sons of God. The New Living is the next one. It says, when the Most High assigned lands to the nations, when he divided up the human race, he established the boundaries of the peoples according to the number in his heavenly court. Kind of, but not, again, really kind of hard to understand what he's talking about. And then what we mostly get in the New American Standard and in the new NIV, basically where it's translated, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. Now, the Masoretic text basically will have sons of Israel, but you go deeper in the Septuagint. Now, there in the earliest copies of the Septuagint, which we have, which is it's probably much, and I believe in scholarly circles, much more respected than the Masoretic. I don't go into the history of the two, but the Septuagint was about 300 BC. Okay, the Masoretic came after, about, I think, 300 or 400 years after Yeshua. Okay, so we're getting farther away from the source, but the Septuagint does refer to this in its verse 8. In the Hebrew, what is it? It's angels of God, angels of Yahweh. This is the predominant reading in Septuagint manuscripts and is nearly unanimous. There's only 2 Septuagint translations we have that are extant that translate it back according to the Masoretic. But there's also, it is translated, the sons of Yah, the sons of God, is attested to in 2 Hebrew manuscripts from Qumran, from the Essenes, which to me, that's the smoking gun. That this is the correct translation, sons of God, which will help us to wrap our minds around what Enoch is saying, that these are the 70 shepherds, these are watchers that were put over the nations. So the textual evidence, a little quote here, cited above, presents a situation which one reading, that of the Septuagint, is supported by very ancient manuscript evidence, notably Qumran, while the other, the Masoretic reading, has a preponderance of the support, thereby creating an oldest versus most predicament. See, this is where the scholar is going to, and to me, those arguments to me are just, why bother? Let's read all, read all the literature, trying to get an understanding what's going on. We understand today, when you unpack the watcher angels in the Genesis 6, it's not hard at all to believe that the correct translation should be the sons of God. Okay? So let me go back to the screen here. Let's see. All right, and go on. And let's see here. Oh, I know what I have to do. Hold on. Just getting a little bit newer. I'm a little new at all this. There. Okay. So let me go on now into unpacking how this would relate to the New Testament. Okay. And what Paul is saying and why it's been so screwed up. Sorry. Because if this is the correct understanding, that the Gentile nations are under these quote unquote other gods by law. I mean, this is something Yahweh did. He established this. This was like his law. You got to figure whatever Yahweh does, it's a done deal. Okay? Until he comes around and changes it. But I did want to get you, I have a couple of lists here of angelic orders, and most of the early church fathers, Jewish mysticism, all these places where you go to unpack all this. I have apostolic constitutions, Gregory the Great, Dionysius, the Areopagite. This comes out of the Zohar. There's basically 9 levels of angelic orders, and they give them different names differently, but in the middle bottom, and they're kind of in the different heavens, but there is principalities, there is powers, and there is thrones, which is basically, most people understand, these are the groups that we are talking about, that these watcher angels would be functioning from. And they have those, it says in here, those under them. When you understand the kingdom, like hostile, like there's a hierarchy, just like in Yahweh's kingdom, there's a hierarchy, okay? And that's how it is. So it's important to understand these things. Now, so let me go to Romans 8. Okay, so here's a statement from Paul, and the translation again, but with this understanding, we're going to begin to unpack this. For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free from the law of sin and death. Now, first of all, this is where we begin to understand. Paul is not talking about the Torah. He is not talking in these verses about the Mosaic Law. Okay, he's not. He is talking about this thing that the Spirit of life, who is, seriously, this is Yeshua. Okay, this is the new birth. This is what he has now been able to accomplish for it. I have a verse here, or a quote, where it's talking about how, another thing you have to understand, when Paul talks about this is very important to understand with Yeshua, when you have your first Adam and your second Adam. The first Adam became a living soul. He was a living being. The second man, Adam, who is likened unto Yeshua, became a life-giving spirit. Okay? So the Spirit of life, see, when it says that Jesus, where Yeshua says, I am the resurrection, I am the life, no man comes unto the Father except through me. When I believe that, no Gentile comes going to, because he is the life. He inherited, or he actually had it when he died, rose again. He went back to his first estate, which was as a life-giving spirit, so he can give us life. He has that ability. That's like, one of his abilities. All right, so he is the life-giving spirit. Has set us free from the law of sin and death. Now, what's the law of sin and death? You have to ask yourself, okay, this is it. See, people understand the nuanceness of a law. In the garden in the fall, when after it was all said and done, the deed was done, highly apocryphal, highly esoteric story, won't go into it. Yahweh found the three of them, Adam, Eve, and the serpent, and he leveled against them, quote unquote, curses. Okay, but in another way, you could flip it around and you could say, okay, fine, deed done. Houston, we have a problem. This is the way it's going to go forward. These are the new laws. Okay, you're not in Kansas anymore. Fine, I get that. You're here. Well, these are the new laws. So we could flip it around, and the curse is really a new law. This is the way it's going to go from now on. He leveled upon them curses that brought sin and death upon them. Number one, death. He said, in the day you are not, now you will suffer death. You have entered into a covenant with death and Hades, it says somewhere else, which is really, when you understand this, I would recommend, listen to my last week's covenant with death and Hades, which is the realms under the earth, the chthonic deities in which they were already subjected to death and corruption. And now by this genetic mix, now the Adamic has now become subject and brought into his genopool, so to speak, death and Hades. This is the way it's going to go. That's the new law. Everybody's going to die. Okay? Whereas before, Adam was immortal and their children would have been immortal. So you understand the context here, the law of sin and death, and there are curses. Women, pain in childbirth, all these different things, the tilling of the land. I can't really, these are they're not at the surface level what they're meaning. They're very highly developed philosophical, esoterical realities of what was going to happen to them now that they had fallen from their high estate into this realm where they were. Okay? So with this understanding now, let's go back into this. Now I want to prove to you from a couple more places. We're going to go in and we're going to unpack a certain word here. Now, this is where translation, see, if you lose your way, if you lose the truth, you are just going to end up lost. This is what Paul said, he knew his words were going to be taken and doctrines of demons. We now have this, quote, Torahless law. People think he was throwing out the Torah. He was a very high Torah-keeping person. And he was encouraging everyone. You've got to keep the Torah at an even higher level. He's talking to the Gentiles. But it had to be nuanced because new circumstances. Yeshua had come on the scene, a life-giving spirit. This life-giving spirit was offering these Gentiles an unbelievable deal, a once-in-a-lifetime deal, okay? But let's go back to this. We're going to go to Galatians 2 and 3, all right? And now if I read this and try to change the word, you kind of say what Paul is referring back to. Remember, he's referring back to Deuteronomy, where it said, look, if you don't remember this, ask your fathers, go to the elders, get the story, go back to the source, okay? In Galatians 4:3, he says he is subject. Now he, I shouldn't assume I know the he in there, but we'll come back to it. Is subject to guardians and trustees until the date set by the father. Actually, this is back to, so with us, when we were children, we were slaves too. This is a translation, the elemental spirits of the universe. Now, these translations, this is where they have no clue what they're translating. But now that we understand this, I'm going to unpack this word. Let's go there. I'm going to do a little screen share here. And let's go and unpack this word, okay, which is found in Galatians 2, 3, and 4. Okay, it is the word stoichion, if I say it correct. Let's see what it says. Stoichion. Okay, it's a noun, it's neuter. Its definition is it's a heavenly body. It's an element. Well, let's stick with a heavenly body. We got some information there. Definition for heavenly bodies. A rudiment or element, a rudiment of principle. Let's throw those away, because I think if we're coming down here, we're getting, now this is what we've always been taught, that it's talking about the basic components of a philosophy, a structure, figuratively first principles. No, we're way past that. We're referring to the rudiments of this world. Paul says, we've been indoctrinated. See, yes, they were indoctrinated, but who were their teachers? Who were their shepherds? The elements of religious training. Okay, we're not getting the information we need there. We're going to go down to the Revised Standard. Has it right. The Revised Standard, however, renders stoichia as elemental spirits. In other words, spiritual powers or cosmic spirits or astral spirits. This view elements, which is another, as ancient astral beings associated with the very beginning makeup of the earth. Now, this is what we are beginning to unpack. We understand now that in the different dimensions, where I said the heavenly realms, there are astral spirits, there are chthonic deities, there are heavenly. This is, there are completely pure, there are archangels, okay? And there's there's cherubim, and there's seraphim, and there's aeons, and there's archons, there's dominions, so these are some of the words. But the point is, this word should be translated as spiritual power or cosmic spirits or ruling deities. This is what it's referring to. So here is Paul, and he's talking about that we are no longer, so let's go there to Galatians 4:3, and he is saying, let's go into the actual parallel here, where he is saying that we are no longer, so we meaning Gentiles, okay, are no longer underage, okay, when we were in slavery to the spiritual tutelar shepherd angels that were put over us. That's what it's referring to, okay? So also when we were children, we were enslaved. See, under the basic principles of the world, that just is not giving you, that's a gloss. That's a total translator infiltrated gloss to let you not understand that these 3%ers that are still ruling the world, these are the problem entities, and they're about to be 100% exposed now, okay? They were exposed in Yeshua's time. When it says that he made a show of them openly, these principalities and powers, that he made a show, he sure did. And for about 200 years, man, they were cowering. They were in the closet, but they came out. So let's just go back here to chapter 4 a little bit more. Let's start here. Now I say, as long as the heir is a child, and this was the point, okay? These, if you read especially in Enoch, you read more in Jasher, you read, the nations refuse like a child to obey their father. Bottom line, they refuse to live Torah righteously, holy. They refused. And so they rebelled, and he finally said, okay, fine. You're going to be a child. I'm going to put over you a guardian and managers until the date set by the Father. That's exactly the context here. And these were these tutelary angels that were over the Gentiles. So he says, also we, when we were children, were held bondage, and that's the same word under the elemental things. It is this word, stoichion, and it means a ruling deity, a ruling spirit, a tutelar, so that he might redeem those who were under the law, that we might, and under the law, this is the point in context. He is not talking about the Mosaic Law. He is talking about the law of sin and death, because that's what that was the law that was still ruling over these Gentiles. Israel was under a different law. This is the whole point. At Sinai, they received a different law. Okay, and they became sons and daughters of the Most High God, and their angel, or their was the angel of the Lord, which really is Yahweh, the Son of God, which is Yahweh, which is Yahweh. Okay, see, because you were sons, God sent you forth the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Therefore, you are no longer a slave, but you are a son, and if a son, then you are an heir through God. And this is what Yeshua was able to do. He bought us back from these tutelar, and this is why the battle was so fierce in the first century. Oh my gosh, I go back now and I look at this in the persecutions. I mean, it was fierce. It's fierce today. It's as fierce today, maybe if not more so. But this is what we're warning us. These deities, these entities are not going to give up without a fight. Oh my gosh. However, at that time when you did not know God, you were slaves to those which are by nature are not God. So even in here, there's a nuance of this understanding. These are not true. These are not our. This is not our Elohim. These are gods who say they're gods, but they're not gods. They're just, ruling angels. They're guardians. They're tutors. They're shepherds. They're going way beyond. Okay, they set up kings of the earth. They've ruled with an iron fist. They have gone way beyond what Yahweh ever allowed, and they're going to be judged. And I can't wait. But now you have come to know Yahweh and be known by Him. And this is what Paul is saying. He's not saying this is how is it that you turn back to the weak and worthless elemental things to which you desire to be enslaved? He's not talking about the Mosaic Law. He's like, look at people, you've been free. He whom the Son sets free is free indeed. You are no longer under their influence. And this explains so much. This explains the country of the meat-eating thing. He whom the Son sets free is free indeed. We are no longer under the influence of these astral deities. If we will walk with Yahweh, obey His commandments, believe in His Son, we have a protective, the blood of Yeshua covers. They cannot get at us. If we really when we get this, when all the sons of God, that the harvest is on the earth today, when we get this and we upset the apple cart, it's going to be amazing. So anyways, I beg of you, brothers, but that I just want to show you, that is the whole context of what Paul is talking about. He got this mystery. He understood it. A lot of this was his schooling. He was such a student of the word and of the nations, their philosophies, like Isaiah. See, this is one of the things that is so important to understand about a true, prophecy. You've got to know not only your own people, your own history, but you need to know the histories of the nations. Okay, this is why today, as we're unpacking, we begin to understand. Oh my gosh, mythology is actually really true. It's way more true than it is fiction. Oh my gosh. So anyways, this is why, like I said, we will judge angels. And as Paul says, he says, now look at, and this is in 1 Corinthians. He says, look at, I am made a minister according to the dispensation of God, which is given for me to fulfill the word of Yahweh. Even the mystery which has been hid from different ages and from different generations. In other words, Israel forgot. This is the whole, they forgot that they were the sons of Yahweh. They didn't act like it. They didn't really believe it. They were not being in their exalted position as the kings and the priests of the earth. They were mixing with the nations. They were at war with the nations. They were like just, when in Rome, do like the Romans. They were trying to fight them on their low, like kids bullies in a schoolyard. Okay, they're all fighting like bullies at this point. And Yeshua comes in, the King of Prince of Peace, and he's like, look, we got to hold. I'm doing this a whole different way. Okay, see, this is why it's so important to understand what Paul got when he took this into the church. For 2,000 years, it's been the time of the Gentiles to go in with this message that any Gentile who calls on the name of Yeshua will be saved, because his name means salvation. The salvation is now in him. Now listen, this is the law that Yahweh, that Yeshua has set up now. That a Gentile can come and be saved by believing in your heart, confessing with your mouth, which is your whole body, soul, and spirit. You leave the kingdom of darkness and the rulers of this world. You enter into a covenantal relationship where he is your Yahweh Elohim, you're his child. You will obey his laws. Okay, this is the whole point. You will obey. He says, if you love me, you will obey me. That's the sign of a true child who is in true covenant relationship. They will obey willingly from their heart the rules of their father. And doesn't that make the father glad? That's the whole point. Who wants a rebellious child? You want someone who will lovingly and submissively just believe that you know it and receive what you have for them. See, it all makes sense when these things are unpacked. But back to Paul, he says, even the mystery which has been hidden. And this is why I say Paul, he's writing so esoteric. He gets these mysteries. Okay? And not because he's so special. I think the guy was brilliant, and I think that he did study in Nicomel, that he also was he had a hugely Hellenized education also, where he knew the worldviews of these people, and he could deal with them on their level. He could walk this, look, I'm going to show you the unknown God. You guys got all these gods that you think, I'll show you who really is the God of gods and the King of kings. I mean, he totally could take them on their level. So, but now it is made manifest to his saints, and to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery. See, this is the point. This is the mystery, that the Jew and the Gentile can become together, can walk together as one new man in Christ, in this new anointing. Do you understand? Yeshua is the name. It's like it's the Hebrew way of saying Joshua. Okay, that's his name, but he is Yeshua HaMashiach. Mashiach is the anointed one. Okay, it is in the anointing that we walk now. It's in this deep understanding that has spiritual power to transform, and to not only transform, to keep you at a higher level, so these astro, deities and these things cannot influence you if you, single-minded, stay focused on him. But those are preachy things. I don't want to do that now. To the intent that now unto the principalities and powers in heavenly places might be known by the church the manifold wisdom of Yahweh. Time. He said, remember it said in Galatians that the child was a child, under these guards until the appointed time. Well, boom, the appointed time, the Messiah came, he did it. Okay? He made a way to save all these lost sheep and these Gentiles, anybody who wanted to come in under the name of Yeshua now. Okay? So Colossians says, let's go into one more verse where he flushes this out. He says, Colossians 2:8, see to it that now that no one takes you captive. Again, this is where the bad translation, captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men. Okay, but then it goes on, according to the spiritual powers of this world. So they kind of have it half right, but you don't pick up on this. What it's saying is they had worldviews. They all concocted all of these, this is the whole mythology, these world origin stories, and of all their gods and all the things that were going on. There was tons of, let no one take you captive through these pagan philosophies of world of origins, okay? And according to the spiritual powers of this. So in other words, don't be bought into these ruling deities that are giving you a bunch of hogwash about you and your place in the universe and who they are and how it really is coming down. Because I'll tell you, and I just listened to this unbelievable YouTube flat earth, this whole thing going on, but fascinating. Again, this is what they do because things are becoming so unpacked and there's so much light, they don't deny kind of this whole world set up under a high God. They just don't ever give the glory to Yahweh Elohim, that he has a name. Yahweh Elohim, his son, Yahushua. How much they do everything they can to skirt around the fact, oh yeah, we know there's different dimensions, and we know there's astral, and you can go, you can do this. You know, we know all this stuff, but they never really come out and say, yeah, you know, by the way, there is a high God over this whole thing. Okay? So anyways, for in him, in Yeshua now, this is the point, in him all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form. You know, and I just have to say this one little rabbit trail, I was getting into really studying out the whole controversy in the early church about the Nicene Creed and, you know, the Arian doctrine and versus whatever the other side was called, whatever, the big council of Nicene had to settle this. But, you know, this thing is so stupid because, but again, it's the divide and conquer. Both sides had truth. They just didn't have the whole truth. If this is what happens when you lose the keys to the kingdom, when you lose the esoteric understanding and you're only dealing with half truths, it's impossible to put Humpty Dumpty Jack together again. Okay, so again, right there, right out of the box, this whole controversy, and it got settled on a half truth. If they had the esoteric understanding and could understand that both sides really have a piece of the puzzle, we all know in part and prophesy in part, we could save ourselves so many schisms. But anyways, I'm back here into Colossians 10, and you have been made complete. And he, Yeshua, is the head over all rule, kingly and magisterial, and authority of spiritual power. Now, this word in it is a word panta, which I've unpacked in other videos. Again, this is goes right along with the word stoichion, because panta is a word that is mostly translated all things. Well, it's not things, it's all beings. In most of its context, it's talking about spiritual, otherworldly, other entity beings, which makes a whole different spin on it. Again, we are always talking about, in the hierarchy of Yahweh, living beings. Okay, and in him you were circumcised with a circumcision made without hand. Now, I won't get into this, but I will unpack, you know, my opinion about Paul and his issue, you know, the thing about the circumcision. Why it didn't have to be controversial. But okay, so we won't go there, but we know that there was an issue with circumcision. Okay, fine. And in him, he is saying you were circumcised with the circumcision made without hands. Okay, in the removal of the body of flesh by the circumcision of Mashiach, or Christ, the anointed one. Okay, having been buried with him in baptism, which were raised with him through faith, when you were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision in your flesh. In other words, when you were dead, when the law of sin and death was ruling over you, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all of our transgressions. That is amazing. The thousands of years of generational curses that were on us, and he canceled. This is the point. And having canceled out the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, this law of sin and death that was accumulating. You know, I mean, seriously, he did not have to forgive the Gentiles. I mean, when you really study out him, he did not. This is his. He is good, and he is giving, and he had a plan. He was going to offer forgiveness, but I don't want to preach. But back here to the text. So he canceled out the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, which is really the law of sin and death, the curses that came into mankind from the garden. That's the law that he's talking about, where he took it out of that was hostile to us. I mean, how hostile is death? I mean, that's pretty hostile, okay? Everybody wants to live forever, you know, blissful, you know? Okay, but death is a real problem. Aging, getting old, body deteriorating, these things are not our friend. He has taken it out of the way. He took those curses, he nailed it to the cross, and he disarmed. This is the point. The rulers, the authorities, the principalities, the powers, he made a public display of them. He triumphed over them. Remember, if Satan had known with a plan never would have crucified the Lord of glory. But praise the Lord, Yahweh is able to hide these mysteries deep enough that even Satan can't figure them out until it's time. And this, Paul got a lot of these messages. It was time. Take this message to the Gentiles. Boom. And Yahweh, the Spirit, confirmed it with demonstrations of the Spirit's power. He was told, Peter was told, look at what you think is unclean, I'm making clean. New ballgame. New ballgame. Okay? So, this again, what it says in Romans 8, for the Spirit, for the law of the Spirit of life, that life-giving Spirit that is in Yeshua, the resurrection, has made us free from the law of sin and death, the curses that came in at the beginning. Now, let me give you a couple of two Old Testament verses here explaining. This was all wrapped in the prophets. This was very, in hindsight is always great. We can look back now and go, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, okay. Ezekiel 11:9, it says, and I will give them, and in the context, it's them is the northern kingdom, the lost sheep, the ones that were now the first group to get totally dispelled and sent into the nations. And they became Gentiles. He says, I will give them one heart and put a new spirit within them. In context now, how could it be? It's perfectly obvious. He said he was going to do it, and he did it. Praise Yahweh. And I will take the heart of stone out of their flesh and give them a heart of flesh. And again, this is an apocryphal wording here. You have to understand what is a heart of stone versus a heart of flesh. A heart of stone, this is when there's a whole way that the prophets use, another way they talk about the different kingdoms. Heart of flesh, Adamic. They once had a heart, a pure Adamic flesh, okay, but it was lost. They took on a heart of stone. They took on a lower life form, a chthonic. They took, the Nakash was a chthonic deity from under the earth, okay? This is one of the, and I don't mean these people, let me just tell you something. Well, I'll begin to unpack all this stuff more and more. And like I said, last week, I think I started to really unpack that. I can't go into it. But again, he will take that heart, which is the evil inclination. Heart of stone, in what this refers to is this whole concept of calcification. So many times he tells Israel, look at your hearts are getting hardened toward you. You had a heart of flesh. You once had a very tender, fleshy, I could work with you. I could massage my word into you. I could work with you. But now you've developed a heart of stone, completely calcified, impenetrable. I couldn't even deal with you guys, so I, kind of put you off to the side until I was ready to implement that plan for you guys. Basically, okay? So, and it says another one, it says in Ezekiel 36:27, and I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. See, this is what Yeshua has been able to do for us. And this is the circumcision of the heart that's Paul talking about. Hey, look at, what is the point? This is what he isn't interested in ritual. The Gentiles had such a generational genetic issue of hardness of heart, right? He had to do a huge work. He had to be able to literally get right in there and circumcise their heart. Forget trying to do rituals. He couldn't even begin to get them up to speed until he was able to penetrate that calcified heart that they had. Okay, so nobody's telling. Paul's never. You don't do the law. You don't obey Torah laws. Of course, you don't kill or steal or commit adultery or be sexual immoral. How many times does he go over all those things? In Revelation talks about those who practice magic arts, liars, perjurers, those adulterers. They're not going to inherit the kingdom of heaven. I mean, come on. So again, this is what I think is very important to begin to unpack, that these angels were misgoverning the world. They're still doing it. See, this is where the ramp, they know their time is short. The ramp up, at the back, their back is against the wall. It's coming out. And, listen to the books and the movies. And, it's just so interesting when you have understanding to see. But the manifestation of the sons of Yahweh is coming. And it's going to totally change the playing field. I am not at all worried about it. So these angels were misgoverning the world owing to their love of power. And he had come to set things right. The government is on his shoulders. He is the King of Kings. We're going to go into a millennial kingdom where, he's going to rule with a rod of iron, and we're going to do it the right way, and everybody's going to have peace and blessing. So On that note, I'm going to end, and I'm going to say blessings. Shabbat, have a wonderful Shabbat, and I will see you again soon. Praise in His name.